being and freely entered into it, becoming temporal in order to relate to this temporal creation and to know tense facts, e.g., what is happening now. Point for this model powerfully affirms God as the creator of time itself and allows for a genuinely interactive, temporal relationship with the world. However, it faces the formidable philosophical objection of how a being that is essentially simple and immutable can undergo such a fundamental change as transitioning from a timeless to a temporal mode of existence. 15. Another significant mediating position is that of relative timelessness, developed by Alan Paget. He suggests that God is temporal, but in his own unique, metaphysical time, or duration, which is distinct from the measured time of our physical universe. 3. God's time is the unmeasured, infinite succession of his own conscious life, whereas our time is metric, defined by the regularities of physical processes. 4. God is therefore timeless, relative to our physical time. He is not constrained or measured by it, but he is nonetheless temporal in his own being, allowing him to change and relate to the world dynamically. 3. While this view elegantly attempts to preserve both divine transcendence and immanence, it has been criticized for the potential incoherence of postulating two distinct kinds of time and for the ambiguity in how our time exists within God's time. 13. The following table provides a comparative summary of these principal models, clarifying their core tenets and implications. Model of divine eternity. Key proponents. God's relation to time. Implication for omniscience. Implication for immutability. Solution to free will problem. Timelessness, atemporality. Augustine, Grotius, Aquinas, Helm. Exists outside of time, experiences all moments in an eternal now. 1. Knows all events simultaneously, does not foreknow in a temporal sense. 1. Absolutely changeless, immutable. 1. God's knowledge is of the event, not its cause. It does not impose necessities. 7. Temporality, sempiternity. Walterstorff, Swinburne. Exists within time, experiences. Faces challenges with. Changes in relation to creation but. Various approaches, including. Temporal succession from an everlasting past to future. 3. Foreknowledge of future free ACTS. Open theism is one response. 1. Essential nature is constant. 1. Denying knowability of future contingents. Hybrid model Craig. William Lane Craig. Timeless sans creation, but becomes temporal with creation. 13. Becomes temporal to know tense facts and maintain omniscience. 4. Changes from timeless to temporal. 15. Combines elements of both, but faces challenge of how a timeless being becomes temporal. Relative timelessness. Paget. Alan Paget. Temporal in his own, metaphysical time, but timeless relative to our measured time. 3. Can interact with and no events in our time without being constrained by it. 4. Changes within his own temporal framework. 3. Allows for dynamic interaction and response to free actions. The evolution of this debate from a classical consensus to a modern plurality of views reveals a significant intellectual current. The arguments for temporality frequently emphasize criteria that are personalistic and relational. God's ability to act, respond, and engage with a changing world are held as paramount. 1. Conversely, the arguments for a temporality often appeal to more abstract, classical metaphysical criteria for perfection, immutability, simplicity, and complete self-sufficiency. 1. The debate over God and time can thus be seen as a proxy for a deeper conflict between different fundamental conceptions of what it means for a being to be maximally great. This is particularly relevant to the user's theory, as the concept of an unmanageable time is an intensely personal and existential one, which might seem to lend itself more readily to a temporal, relational God. Yet, as this analysis will show, the classical temporal model may ultimately offer a more profound framework for understanding such a crisis. Section 2. Omniscience and the Challenge of Foreknowledge. The attribute of divine omniscience, or God's all-knowing nature, is inextricably linked to his relationship with time. 17 To be omniscient is not merely to possess a vast quantity of information, it is to be the ultimate criterion of truth and falsity, such that God's ideas are, by definition, true. 17 This knowledge is understood to be universal and exhaustive, encompassing every detail of creation and every event throughout history, past, present, and future. 17 It is this claim of exhaustive knowledge of the future that generates one of the most persistent and difficult problems in all of theology, the apparent conflict between divine foreknowledge and human free will. 20 The foreknowledge versus free will dilemma. The dilemma can be stated simply: if God, in his omniscience, infallibly knows from eternity past every choice a person will ever make, in what sense can that person's choices be considered free? 21 The very certainty of God's knowledge seems to imply the necessity of the event known. If God knew yesterday that you would choose to read this sentence today, it seems you could not have done otherwise, for that would mean God's past knowledge was wrong, which is impossible for an infallible being. 23 This line of reasoning suggests that human freedom is an illusion and that all events are fated. 21 This problem has led theologians down several paths. Some, like the Protestant reformer Martin Luther, embraced the conclusion and argued that divine foreknowledge does indeed preclude human free will in the libertarian sense, the ability to choose otherwise. 21 In this view, God's foreknowledge is based on his foreordination. He knows the future because he has decreed it. 21 This position, known as theological determinism, preserves divine sovereignty at the expense of human freedom. However, the majority of the Christian tradition has sought to defend the compatibility of both divine omniscience and genuine human freedom, recognizing that without free will, concepts of moral responsibility, praise, blame, and divine judgment become incoherent. 16. Atemporality as a solution. The classical solution to this dilemma, articulated most powerfully by Boethius and Augustine, is to deny that God has foreknowledge in the first place. 7. The prefix for is a temporal concept, implying knowledge of an event before it happens. If God is atemporal, existing outside the stream of time in an eternal now, he does not know future events ahead of time. Instead, he knows all events, past, present, and future, in a single, direct, and timeless act of cognition. 4. Boethius compares God's knowledge to that of a spectator watching a chariot race. The spectator sees all the events as they happen, but his seeing them does not cause them to happen. Similarly, God perceives the entire timeline of a person's life as a present reality. His knowledge of a future free choice is therefore not predictive but descriptive. It is knowledge of the event as it is freely chosen, not a cause of the event. 7. Augustine makes a similar point. No one sins because God foreknew that he would sin. In fact, the very reason why a man is undoubtedly responsible for his own sin is because he whose foreknowledge cannot be deceived foresaw that the man himself would be responsible for his own sin. 16. The logical priority is reversed. It is not that you choose X because God knows it, it is that God knows you will choose X because, in your temporal frame, you will in fact freely choose X. 21. This elegant solution dissolves the problem of fatalism by removing the temporal gap between God's knowing and the human acting. God's knowledge does not impose necessity on the future any more than a human historian's knowledge imposes necessity on the past. Theories of time and their impact. This entire debate is deeply interwoven with metaphysical theories about the nature of time itself. 1. The two dominant theories are the A theory and the B theory. Filled circle A theory, tensor dynamic theory of time. This theory aligns with our common sense experience. It holds that time genuinely flows or passes, and that the distinctions between past, present, and future are objective features of reality. Point to only the present moment, that now is truly real. 5. For A theorists, the future is open and does not yet exist. This makes divine foreknowledge particularly problematic, as it seems God would have to know facts about a non-existent future. Most proponents of a temporal God are A theorists. 1.13. Filled circle D theory, tensorless or static theory of time. This theory, often associated with Einstein's physics, holds that time does not genuinely flow. All moments of time, past, present, and future, are equally real and exist in a four-dimensional space-time block. 2. The flow of time is a subjective illusion of human consciousness. The B theory is highly compatible with the atemporal view of God. If all moments exist eternally, then an atemporal temporal God can easily perceive the entire block in his eternal now, and his knowledge of future events is simply knowledge of a real, existing part of the timeline. 13. The atemporal solution to the foreknowledge problem works most smoothly within AD theory framework. However, many of its proponents, including William Lane Craig, argue it can also be made to work within A theory, though the mechanics become more complex. 9. Challenges to the atemporal solution. Despite its elegance, the atemporal solution is not without its own difficulties. One major challenge is the prophet problem. 4. If a timeless God reveals a future contingent event like a free choice to a temporal prophet, that knowledge is now fixed in the prophet's past. For example, if God told Isaiah in 700 BC that King Cyrus would freely choose to release the Israelites, then from 700 BC onwards, it became a fixed, past truth that Cyrus would make that choice. This seems to reintroduce the necessity that atemporality was meant to avoid, as Cyrus would no longer be free to do otherwise without changing the past. 4. A second challenge concerns God's knowledge of tense facts. 4. To be truly omniscient, God must know every truth. A proposition